Welcome to the Integral Stage Sexuality Series. I'm Layman Pascal, and before I host my high-priced week-long workshop on integrative sexuality at a seaside Caribbean resort, I need to make sure I've been fully exposed to the multidimensional richness and profundity of this topic. A topic that most people find deeply physically compelling, emotionally significant, and for some people intellectually fascinating and brimming with spiritual and developmental potential. Here to share the ins and outs of their understanding is... Why don't you tell us who you are and where you are?
Okay, I'm Rebecca Lowrie. I am in Gloucestershire in the United Kingdom.
Terrific. Now, you've got a podcast called the Sexual Alchemy Podcast. Why alchemy? What does that word mean for you?
Well, I've been working in the sexuality field for about 15 years. And when I first started, I was just kind of using my name as the business name. And then I was listening to a webinar by Caroline Myss. I don't know if you know her. She's a medical intuitive. And she was talking about alchemy. And as she was talking about, I think life alchemy at the time. But as she was talking about, I was thinking, well, that's what I do. I just do it through the doorway of sexuality. I do sexual alchemy. And I was like, oh, that's a good name. And so my business and my work became Sexual Alchemy then. And so the podcast is the Sexual Alchemy Podcast, because that's what I do.
Terrific.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of focus on men, on male experience of sexuality. Why? What makes that so important for you?
Oh, good question. The bottom line of that is that that's just my calling. It's not a personal preference. When I first started doing the work, I was open to anyone. I worked with people of all genders, all sexuality orientations, couples and thruples and trans people and men and women and all of that. But I noticed that my sweet spot, the magic, really happened with men. Like I could navigate other things and I could be helpful, but it wasn't as mind-blowing as what was happening with men. And I had a lot of mentors telling me, you should niche. And I was like, oh, but I want to help everyone, my heart's in it and I really want to help everyone and all of that. But after a while, I realized that actually, I'm very much about integrity and being true to that which comes through me and getting any ego or self out of the way. And so in order for the work, that makes me feel emotional even as I say it. So in order for that which wants to come through me and me to be in service to it, I need to follow it. And it was very clear that, I can help people, but my magic comes out with men. And so I niched.
When you say your magic comes out, what's that like? What is, a lot of people might not know what that refers to.
We were talking about the word awesome just before you hit record. I would say it's awesome when that happens. It is, and I mean it in what I think is the literal sense of the word. It is awe. I'm in awe of what comes through. I'm just the channel for it, really. But what was the question you just asked? It was what is the magic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let me put some words to that. Interestingly, I've recently created a new website, and in the creating of that, it was recommended that I make a video saying, what is sexual alchemy? So I've tried to put words to it. So let me give you some of those words because they're the most important. I would say that, so sexual alchemy, from me, it's several things at once. So you know how like you can have a wave of light or a particle of light. Sexual alchemy it's transformation. It's a process, but a unique process to each individual. And I also talk about it as a ancient technology energy system that flows through me in response to something in front of me that needs it and has consented to it. Sometimes not consented to it.
This energy or intelligence that flows through you, where is it coming from? Do you stand in a lineage of transmission, or is it coming from all over, or what's the source of this flow?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me just feel into that. My sense, and I would really want to explore more. You think I'd be curious about that? my sense of that is that it is just a particular strand, if you will, of source energy, like one of the many strands in the tapestry of source energy that for whatever reason I'm an antenna for or channel for. Yeah. Yeah. That. I mean, it might be better explained if I were to give you a practical thing. Well,
Please do. Yeah.
it's practical in my mind. It might sound woo to everyone else, but I've often said, in fact, I said this morning on social media, the gift I feel I have is that when I sit with a man who wants to do the work, I can look into his eyes and see and feel and sense his being before the conditioning, fear, shame, crap of life got shoved on top. And it's been a curse in the past, but it's currently a gift because I got hold of it. And what happens is when that's witnessed in someone, it's activated. And when it's activated, you can start to be with it. You can start to bring it into embodiment, into consciousness, into play in their life. And so it's something in me that can see that. And I don't see it in women the same way, or couples, forget it, like multiple people at once. No, unless I'm holding a group. I could hold a group, but then I can't work with the individuals in the group, So it's at its, I guess, most highest frequency with the right man in front of me. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very interesting. It makes me curious about what was it like when this capacity to see that underlying being was a curse for you? And did that help sort of drive you towards this calling and the trainings that might have gone with it?
I think it did. So I couldn't tell you when I started to see that exactly. I always had a curiosity about sexuality. I knew that whenever I was being sexual, it was very, I was plugged into source, is all I could say. I didn't have those words at the time, but it was much more expansive than just than penetration or intercourse or something. It was like cosmic, but I didn't know that word then. And of course, what began to happen is, you're out in the club or whatever, and some guy like looks at you, and I can see that in him. And so I started being with men as if they were their higher self, or whatever you want to call it, or that pristine self before all the shit happened. But then that's not who they were being in their everyday life. And for many of them, their issues would get triggered, because that's the other thing, is that which comes through me wants to pluck out the weeds that aren't working for you. And so they have to rise to the surface. It's like, great, there they are. Let's pluck that out. Let's do some energy work. Let's, whatever it is. But back then, all it did was like trigger them. They would have all sorts of sexual issues. And I'd be like, why aren't you being this God I can see in front of me? And they were just like, blah, So it was not great at first. I got into some relationships that weren't what I expected them to be.
What are the sort of the main types of motives or complaints that bring men to see you?
When I first started, I would say men came with very specific sexual issues, like wanting to get and maintain better erections, wanting to last longer in bed, wanting to get some confidence, little to no experience with intimacy and pleasure, or maybe they heard of things like contrasexuality or tantra, or they just kind of knew intuitively that there was more to it than just, banging away or whatever. So they wanted all those things were, I called my bread and butter. That was the stuff that came along. I could heal it pretty quickly most of the time, about 4 to 6 sessions. Sometimes someone would get that which they came for, then realize that there was so much more to learn and expand on, so they would come and work with me over months and years. But that was how they first started coming to me. More recently, I still get that, but I get a lot of men now who shut the door on their sexuality a long time ago for whatever reason, and they're ready to claim that part back, to become whole in that way again. Well, they're already whole, but to know themselves as whole. And it's a much deeper work that happens now. I mean, I still love working with the specific sexual issues, it's great, and we go deeper than just that. I say, like, how a man feels about himself in the bedroom is how he carries himself in the rest of his life, because there's so much pressure on a man, and how a man should know how to be in the bedroom and what he's supposed to bring to the bedroom and all of that. So if a man feels, I'm all right, I'm all right there, he's going to carry himself in his life like, I'm all right. If he feels shit about himself in the bedroom, often he will either hide himself away in life or overcompensate. It's been my experience.
So you're providing a mixture of like some technical information, some therapeutic relationship, but then this other element of subtle energetic effect and transmission.
Yeah, I mean, when someone asks me, so what do we do in session? How does it work? I tell them that most of the work is energy work, and some of it is physical on the body. But even the physical work that I'm doing on the body is energy work at its core. It's just that we're multiple levels of beingness, aren't we? And so sometimes you can access the energy through the body, or the body through the energy. And it depends on where someone's doorway is at that time. So I can work on Zoom with people, thank God, during this pandemic. I've been working on Zoom and people have been having just amazing outcomes. My preference is to have someone's body in front of me, but Zoom's been wonderful. Zoom's been great. And so the bottom line is energy work. I work intuitively. I tune into someone's body and energy system, and it tells me what they need. So, sometimes someone's come with an erection issue, but what their body's telling me is that time that someone said something to them when they were 20 has caused an impact in the system, and we've got to go and heal that. And then that helps the energy flow. If there's a kink in a hose pipe, water doesn't flow. And that kink in the system can be caused by, it doesn't have to be trauma, it can just be a passing comment that got stuck in the system. So yeah, energy work, physical work, and then there's always context, isn't it? So there's always a bit of conversation, a bit of, I don't know, counseling or something with conversation that gives context to make someone feel safe and to let the work go in deeper.
There's a lot of social interest these days in how do we make sense of the homosexual experience and the transgender experience and these sorts of things. And I'm curious what your take is on the very notion of masculine and feminine. Do you think that's a fundamental part of the universe, or is it just a convenient way of talking about polarized energy? Or should we be trying to think past it into a more plural, multi-directional way of approaching sexuality?
That is a big question. Let's discuss it rather than me going blah.
Please, yeah.
And because it's interesting because I know a lot of people who talk about, we're going to heal the masculine and we're going to do the masculine and the feminine. And even on my website, I say something about empowered masculinity. But I always kind of jump at those terms. And I think in part because I think they get used incorrectly. I think that the mainstream tends to use those words like masculinity to mean men and feminine to mean women. And that's not what those words originally pointed to. Originally they pointed to a form of energy that we all have within us. And I think it's a bit like saying, is it black or is it white? Men are black and women are white. And that's how it is. And I'm like, no, for example, now I'm going off on a slight tangent, but I think it will help. Pull me back anytime.
Sure.
High tantra, what I think of as high tantra, which is not the Western watered down version of that focuses on sex, but high tantra was about integrating all of your energies within you, integrating source within you. And I think, that was often explored through integrating your own masculine and feminine. But again, that still points to a binary. It's take it within, and then if you want to explore it without, so outside of yourself, what happened was it became, if I'm integrating these two opposite polarities within me, then I must have opposite polarity outside to do the same. But that's bullshit. You can have, if we're using those words still, masculine and masculine, or feminine and feminine, and see how do they meet? How do they play? How do they dance? What's erotic between them? Of course. And then if it was black and white or binary, and you combine them, you get all sorts of shades of colors, don't you? So I think it's the same. I struggle with those terms because I don't think they're used well.
Mhm.
I don't have better terms yet.
Yeah, I think the minimum move is to separate masculine and feminine from male and female. That's that's the least we can expect in a good conversation about sexuality.
Yeah, I think that's right. That, you know, masculinity and femininity are not genders, and they're not sexes. They're energy.
The notion of high tantra makes me think of some people have this sense that you can have a sex-like polarized relationship with anything and everything, and that maybe you should. But then there's this sense that our sexual energy goes into places that aren't really sexual and kind of sabotages our sexuality and makes non-sexual areas too sexualized. So, what's your take on that? Should sexuality be greater or lesser? Is sex a specific energy, or is all energy sexual? How do you hold those two things?
It's interesting because in order to discuss that, it's almost like we have to preempt with some discussion around language. So when I talk about sex or sexuality, I am not necessarily, usually not at all, pointing to intercourse or penis and vagina, which is what a lot of people, when they say, "Oh, did you have sex?" they mean, was there some penetration and did somebody come? And that's what one expression of sex and sexuality. But I lean much more towards what you said at first about being able to expand our sexual energy into anything and everything. I think it's already there. It's life force energy. I think it is the matrix. It is the web of everything. And I think that unfortunately, we have come to believe that if we sexualize something, it needs to be an adult genital related thing. And I don't think that's a way. But I think that's like a teeny tiny strand in the multitude of what's possible. And I think that's why there's so much dysfunction everywhere around sexuality, because it's like we've taken all of source and we've said this little teeny weeny dot over here is what sex is, and anything else is wrong. And then, but we can all feel all the rest of it. And then we think we're bad and wrong for feeling it. And then shame and guilt comes in, and then it makes that teeny tiny little dot dysfunctional. So it's like I'm often trying to help people to expand their ideas of what sex and sexuality and sexual energy is. I mean, I could go down a rabbit hole with that if you want, but like one day I'll write a book about that.
The question of shame and guilt is really interesting. It seems like a bunch of your work is focused on trying to free an underlying healthy whole individual from these constraints that they've received. But I wonder, what's the healthy role of those things? Is there an appropriate role for shame and guilt?
Let me point more to shame here, and then I can think about both. But for me, with shame, I have heard an argument that there is a role for shame so that we can fit into society, so that we know, don't go down the pub and take off all your clothes and shout and poop on the floor. Right? Because that would be dangerous potentially for us. And so in that way, you could argue, I think, that shame helps. And I think Brene Brown, who's like the expert on that, says there are places where shame helps us in those ways. But I think the thing is to be conscious about it. I'm not going to get down the pub and do those things because, well, I know better, but also like, it wouldn't be safe for me. And I would feel shamed if I went down there and did that. And maybe that would help me grow and not do it again. But then if I internalize that shame, or if I then, if I accidentally did those things, then I might think I'm bad and horrible. And then that becomes guilt because my behavior is bad and wrong. All of that perhaps has a use for a limited time, but then can become dysfunctional. Even like strategies that we create, if we have a difficult childhood or difficult relationship or something, we'll create strategies to deal with that. Maybe we become, like my story was that I became a yes person. It was just easier to say yes to everything and anything. And that way I didn't get shouted at and I didn't have love withdrawn. So I would say yes to everything. Great strategy for survival, not a great strategy for building good relationships later. And so I would say it served me for a while. And then at some point, I need to become conscious that I'm using it as a strategy and rethink that. And so I think it's the same with shame and guilt. I think they can be useful. I don't know if they're strategies, but useful things. And then we need to become conscious of them and make a choice. Do I need to keep that in place? Is it serving me? Or shall I let it go and let something else arise in its place? I think.
So where do they tend to sabotage our sexual life? And what's involved in becoming conscious and releasing that?
But you ask big questions. Woo! Which is great.
Yeah, why do anything else?
Right? Absolutely. We're going to go there. Let's go there. So what? Yeah. How does shame and guilt? What was it again? I got all excited that you asked it.
How does shame and guilt sabotage our sexuality, and how do we get past that?
Right. Well, the top layer of that is they shut us down in some way. They make us reshape ourselves into what is acceptable rather than who we really are, basically. So instead of saying, I like to have sex with the lights on, I like to be spanked, I would like to have sex, or I'm aroused, or, that thing over there that no one talks about out loud arouses me, or any part of it, just for being a sexual being or having a body or exploring pleasure, we get shamed for. And so it shuts us down, squishes all of who we are into, not enough space. And then we feel guilty for having thoughts about sex because it's unnatural. But it's like saying you should never feel hungry. You should never feel hungry. Aren't you terrible for feeling hungry? You're going to feel hungry because it's a natural bodily thing. And then you're going to make yourself wrong and feel guilt because it naturally arises. What a mess, right? And then you're going to move forward in your life differently. You're not going to build the same relationships with shame and guilt as you might if you didn't have them. I think that happens. I think, that's part of what's wrong with the whole cohort of humanity is that we've been squashed, not just our sexual stuff, but that's just the realm I've been given to work on. I think, again, I could go down the rabbit hole with shame. I think shame is a tool of control.
So in terms of becoming more conscious, more responsible for our shame, what does that involve aside from, mentally observing that it's there? How do we really embody that?
Let me just sit with that minute. So you recognize it's there. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
First thing is to hold space for it, to not try to cut it out of you or kick it out or tear it out. The way of working with energy in the past used to be, let's cut that cord or let's rip it out. And I don't think that's how we should work anymore. I think it's more like call it in like a welcome guest. Hi, shame. I knew you were in there somewhere. Please come and sit with me. Let's have a cup of tea. Let's have a chat. I love you so much. You were useful to me. You were helpful. You helped me navigate something. You're not even mine. I can see that you are my mother's voice or you are the teacher's, but I internalized you. So come and sit with me and let's talk and let me love you a little bit and let's see what we can do here. Because I think that ripping any part of ourselves out is no good anymore. I think we need to just call those parts in, offer them love as best we can, or get someone else to love them if we can't, because it's hard, to love our own stuff, and watch it over time. Sometimes just giving it loving attention and space, acknowledging it, will start to dissolve it, which is great. And I mean, there's lots of practical things you can do if A lot of people are like, oh, I can't stay with that kind of meditation or whatever. You can write it out, let the shame hold the pencil and write what she or he is feeling, and let it go, and ask it questions, and let it go, and let it go, and let it go, and write it out, dance it out, move your body it out, shout it out, go to the woods and make animal sounds, but let it have its voice.
A couple of times there, you said something like, that's not how we should deal with it anymore. Do you feel like your work is part of a civilization shift or a humanity shift, or, is there a transition going on?
Yeah, that's a good question too. There's a whole bit here that I don't know much about, that I'm just going to touch on. You probably know more about it, but I think that consciousness expands all the time. Maybe our universe is expanding all the time. I don't know if it's coming back this way. I don't know, but it kind of does that, doesn't it? And consciousness probably does. And we breathe like that. And I think that's kind of the movement of the universe. I don't know. And so energy work seems to be the same. And I feel like energy work is, in a movement of expansion now. And that is more focused. At least the work I do and that I see some colleagues doing is more focused on welcoming the whole of who you are, rather than trying to cut off parts of you that we perceive as not right or not good enough or whatever. That, I think that now is harmful. In fact, I would say that when I was a baby healer back like 25 years ago, I was taught things like, I'll heal that bit out, or, could you cut it, or could you slice it, or get, the energy knife it, or I was taught all sorts of stuff like that. And it was a useful tool, but it feels not right at all to me now. And what I'm most interested in now is, and what my work is now, isn't clearing all the fear, shame, conditioning, blah, 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 so that we can put something else in. We're not putting anything in anymore. Like energy used to be about putting things in. I used to do Reiki. It was about putting energy in. I'm not putting energy in. I'm clearing the fog of that which isn't you, so that who you really are arises into the space. So I think energy healing has changed. I keep going.
That's very intriguing. I really enjoyed the episode of your podcast about posture, and about holding different postures to animate different energetic and chemical states in ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you thought that that's part of what's behind people's interest in pornography, is to view the different postures and asanas that people take.
It's interesting. I have thought that before. I think it's become something else, but possibly at the core of our desire to watch others being sexual is almost like, I can't be in that position right now, or I don't have someone to do that with, but by witnessing it, my body gets a chemical experience of it. Like there's a thing about if you do a nice thing for someone, you get some good chemicals. The person on the receiving end of it gets good chemicals. It naturally happens, but also anyone that witnesses that act gets that. And so you could say in pornography, if you're witnessing someone actually enjoying the sex that they're having, that's a whole nother topic, then yes, your pleasure would be aroused by that, in theory. And so whether that's through the positions that they're taking in your body, going, oh, I remember what it's like to be open, or I remember what it's like to be penetrating, or, something like that. Very possibly, yeah. I think there is something there, though, about, I think there's porn that is excellent. It's the performers are actually enjoying themselves, but they are performers. That's okay. That's all right. But I think there's a lot of porn where that's not the case. And so that's another thing, it's like, there's, as a viewer, what intention are you bringing? Are you there? Are you watching with shame, therefore reinforcing shame in yourself? Or are you there because, this is really hot and it turns me on and I'm going to enjoy it? Great, and then what you're watching. So, but I know I've gone off a little bit about what you're saying about how you use body posture, but yeah, I think that could be a part of porn watching. Yeah.
If you don't mind being biographical, I'm curious about, looking back at your life, what do you think are some of the stages you've been through relative to how you view sexuality? If there was 3 or 4 major shifts in your life, what would they have been?
Okay, I've got one, but I want to see if I can think of one earlier than that. Because I can remember the moment that I knew I was going to do this work, but I'm trying to think what was earlier than that. I mean, there were probably a lot earlier than that, because the thing that happened, which I'll come to in a minute, that brought me to this work was because I had, up to that point, I'd been really interested in sexuality. I'd had a really promiscuous time, which mostly I'd enjoyed, because mostly I was like, I need to find someone to have sex with so I can get plugged into the universe. I didn't know that I could do it on my own. Not masturbation, but it just happened naturally when I was with someone. But that led to a lot of poor choices, shall we say. And so there was I mean, the one that's coming that was really unpleasant was in university and going home with someone and kind of doing the do. And then he said, hang on, I'll be right back. I was like, where are you going? And he went and got his roommate. It was like, now have sex with him. I was like, I didn't agree to this. Like, why do you think this is okay? And being very uncomfortable and wondering, did I do or say something that made him think that this was all right? And how do I get out of this? Now I'm really scared and don't feel safe. And I ended up doing it because I was scared. That's some fucked up shit, right? That's really fucked up. And afterwards thinking, like, who I am now, that would not happen anymore. Like, that would not happen. But I wasn't taught that women could say no. I was taught that if a man was aroused near you, it was your fault for turning him on. Again, some fucked up shit, right? I was also taught that men were the ones that were super horny and wanted to have sex with everything, and women didn't feel that way and were very demure and, waited till they were good wives. But that wasn't my experience. My experience is that I had so much sexual energy and was aroused all the time, and I didn't know what to do with it, So that was my early stuff, was not great, And then at some point I was like, well, instead of them coming after me, I'm gonna go after them. That gives me some control back, kind of thing. And that was a little bit better. But at some point I thought, I'm not driving this car real well. Like, I've got all this energy. It's driving me to make some poor choices. And I'd heard about tantra, it was like the new nouveau thing over here in the UK. And so this is the story I was going to tell you. So I went to a festival. It was a Buddhist festival. It was no drink, no drugs, very family friendly. And I'd heard that there was a tantra workshop going on, and thought, I must go, So I'm like strolling down the field to this marquee, and people are running past me. And I realized they were running to this workshop, and they were saying, hurry, they're going to close the marquee doors. No one else can get in. And I was like, chucking it down there, And it was a 2-hour workshop and a marquee full of people. Again, no drinks, no drugs. But at the end of it, I was looking around. I noticed these people were like they'd seen God or something. They were just in this most divine state. And I looked over at the teacher, and I've told this story in one of my podcasts. It was like a spotlight came down on her, and I could hear the universe whisper in my ears, you will do this work. I was like, oh, hell no. And I took her leaflet, I put it next to the laptop, because it was the PC, because it was that long ago. And then I cried my eyes out for about 18 months every time I saw it, because I was so afraid to do the work. Eventually I did go and work with her, and that changed the nature of my sexual experiences in a much better way. So I think, but I'm grateful for all of the experiences, because they all taught me about humans' experiences of themselves as sexual beings, of where a lot of the dysfunction lies, around where entitlement sits, around, how genders are sexualized or not sexualized, what's expected of them. It's such a treacherous terrain, really. Whatever any gender has been taught is so limited and damaging. So I think, I'm grateful for all those experiences I had, because I've learned so much, I guess. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. The thing with the roommate seems like an experience where you had to appreciate a very contradictory situation, right? Where you sort of had gone in with one feeling and now you're doing something and it's not what you want to do. And in the way you told it, it struck me as, multiple parts of the situation were in conflict.
Oh, the whole thing was conflict.
And I wonder then how much of this can be taught in terms of our own sexual maturation, and how much do we have to gain by being exposed to the contradictions that are built into us so that we can move past them?
I think there's a lot that can be taught. I think that we can teach intuition. We can teach inner hearing and inner knowing of what's right for us. We can teach boundaries and consent. We can teach how to hear our own yes or no to something, and then what to do about that. I knew I had a big fat no to that, but I didn't know how to get out of it. I was scared. There were these two men coming at me. I was drunk, and I maybe could have said no. I was scared. So at 20, whatever that I was, with no tools for how to do anything with that. So we can teach some tools. We can teach how to hear your inner knowing, what to do with it, boundaries and consent, what is okay and what isn't, in terms of nowadays, I think it's taught a little bit more. Like, even if you've said yes and you're in the middle of it, you can decide it's not right for you and stop. But I was never taught that. I didn't figure that out on my own. I had to be taught it. I was naive, And a few years ago was teaching a workshop at a tantra festival. And at lunchtime, this guy sat down next to me and said, "Oh, how's your morning been? Did you have a good time?" I said, "Well, no, not really." And I said, "Oh, what happened?" He said, "Well, I was in this workshop and this guy touched my penis and I didn't want him to." And I said, "Well, did you tell him no, that's not okay?" And he said, "No, I didn't tell him." I was like, "Well, why didn't you?" And he said, "Well, the teacher didn't tell us we could say no." And I think a lot of us, we don't get from early on, our boundaries aren't respected. We aren't taught it's okay to say no or yes, depending on what it is. So I think a lot of it can be taught. I think there's a lot of stuff that can be taught that helps us navigate what you're talking about with more grace and less trauma.
When you think back to your early life, in terms of just becoming aware of the topic of sexuality and yourself as a sexual being, when you think about that person, what would you tell her? And what's your overall approach to, educating children about these things?
I don't work with children, although I have spoken with teenagers before, and they were awesome. I would tell her to trust her embodied knowing, trust her body. Even if her brain's saying yes, trust what the body's saying, how to read that more accurately. And that if she feels a no, that's much more important than what that guy's going to think of her or say about her, or how mad he's going to be, or any of that, how he's going to reject her, what he's going to say to his friends. All that shit is, who cares? Respecting and honoring myself was much more important. I would say that. And then I would teach myself boundaries and consent.
Well, how do you do that? How do we get better at boundaries?
When I teach it, I like to start with getting people familiar with what yes and no and maybe feels like in your body. Now, out in the world, all of that stuff has much more nuance to it, but if you can lay a groundwork of, oh, that feels like a yes, oh, that feels like a no, that's a start. Because, often our body knows before our mind knows. Often a yes or no is a feeling thing, not a logical thing. It might be like, on paper, it makes sense for me to do this thing, but it doesn't feel right. I don't know why, but it doesn't feel right. Always trust your spidey senses, So I've already forgotten what the question was. I was talking about that. Oh, how do we teach boundaries and consent?
Yeah,
So we come into the body. So to go back to some of the rabbit hole I said I would go down, I feel like as a society, as a culture, as a world, human cohort, we've retreated from up here. So to the neck up, because we've come to value the thinking analytical mind. We've come to dismiss everything below there. I think that was actually on purpose and part of control. It's a whole nother story, more rabbit holes. But if you are dismissing everything from the neck down, you're not in touch with your body. You're missing out on what even science has proven now. There's a brain in your heart, a brain in your gut. It's probably more. We have gut feeling for a reason, And so even if you can get the mind and the heart and the gut working together, you can make a much fuller decision. And so you can teach people how to be more in their bodies. You can teach people how to listen to their bodies. You can teach people what will get in the way of you hearing your body. How do you listen to your body and your mind and know where to act from? You can also become more aware of your unconscious things that you do. So for example, one of the things I teach along with boundaries and consent is conscious touch. So we go about our day. I don't know about you. I'm very touchy-feely, but I'm not touchy-feely with people I don't know. I would ask, is it all right if I touch your knee or, whatever it is. Quite often when we touch people unconsciously, we also have an intent that we're not sure about. So for example, you could be on a date and a guy puts his arm around you, and it's very hetero, but his intent might be, I really want to have sex with you. She might be thinking, oh, he's just being sweet. But it doesn't feel sweet. His action is sweet, but there's something else in it. And now I'm confused. He may not know that's what he's thinking. So we can get conscious about what our intention is and what we're putting into our conversation, what's our energy saying to each other? What's it saying either in our touch and in all the non-physical ways that we communicate as well. That's going to help us navigate boundaries and consent. It's going to help us read other people's and their intentions. And it's going to help us be more conscious with our own. Yeah, there's something. The other bit I think is really important here, before I forget, is helping people to recognize if their tendency is towards being a yes or no person. Like my tendency was to be a yes person. Some people are, how they're brought up, become a no person. It might be that it's just easier to say no to everything because that's safer, but then they're missing out on good stuff. And a yes person is getting like steamrolled over because you become a doormat because you can't find your no. So then the next bit of boundaries of consent with that is to practice receiving and saying a yes or a no, depending on what's, difficult for you. So like for me, hearing a no, it's like, oh, what, you hate me? Whereas actually, the truth is, if a person is saying no, they're saying yes to themselves. If they're saying no to me, they're saying yes to themselves. And that is what I really want. I want everyone to say yes to themselves. But if a lot of people take no as a rejection of them. So there's a lot of subtlety in all of that. And just learning where your own triggers are. Oh, I take no's really hard, but let me come into this new relationship or this one conversation or whatever, open to that and see how that changes our interaction. So yeah, there's a lot that can be taught with all of that.
You seem very tuned into what we might call the subtle body. So, the inner dynamic sensitivity of being an embodied being. Has that always been there for you, or did it sort of awaken at some point in your life?
It's definitely awakened over time. I wasn't aware of it until about 25 years ago. I did a massage course, and I knew I had a natural, I can't think of the word. I was naturally very good at it. I knew I was, and I had a lot of good feedback. I could feel something more than just the body. So that was kind of my first, like, there's something going on there. And then at some point during this course, we were to each give and receive a massage. And there was one person left over who came and said, can I do some energy work on your person that you're massaging? And I was like, whatever, and they asked the person said yes. So I can't remember. I think I was at the head. I was doing the shoulders. at the head, and they came over, like put their hand over the belly, not touching, but just, hovering over. And I could feel something. And I asked them to move away, and the feeling I could feel moved away, and I asked them to come back. I had my hand on the shoulders at the time, and it was like, I can feel that. That's really weird, And so it kind of started there. I was like, there's more to us than just our physical flesh. We're multidimensional, really. And so over time, I've explored all kinds of different weird modalities and healing this and energy that, and it's refined. The work that I do is refined, I guess, working on so many bodies and people. And I work with a teacher who, her intuitive skills are beyond mine. So we work together, and so it's got more awakened and more refined over time. In fact, the teacher I told you, I had her leaflet next to my PC. When I eventually went to work with her, I was doing it was a 6-month course, 1 weekend a month for 6 months. And at the second one, she said to me, can you take so-and-so out at lunchtime and do a session for him? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you take him out. He'll just ask him, but he'll want to go. Just take him out and do a session. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what a session is. And she said, you'll know what to do. I was like, okay. So I was curious. So I asked him, he said, yes. We went out and I asked him what was going on. And I didn't know what to do. I knew what to do with his body and energy. And it was like, and it had a huge impact. And I went back to her and said, what the fuck was that? And she said, you already know this stuff. You just don't know what you know. So let's awaken it in you. And so then I went on to consciously awaken stuff. I assisted her for a few years, and I went and studied with other teachers to have my own journey, because I think you learn best by having your own journey. And through all of that, something awakened.
You've been with a number of different teachers then. So what do you think makes a really good sexual mentor?
First thing foremost is someone who walks their talk, someone who has done the work on themselves and continues to do the work on themselves, someone who is answerable somewhere. I think that there was a phase here in the UK, I don't know about anywhere else, of a lot of people going to sexuality workshops and tantra workshops, having a bit of awakening and thinking, I'm a therapist now. I'm a sex therapist. I'm going to set myself up. And in some cases that work. I mean, that's more or less what I did. I was like, oh, I've had awakening. I'm going to set myself up. So, it's not necessarily bad, but what I saw was a lot of people who didn't then continue doing work on themselves. And so then they're reinforcing all the places they didn't work on in themselves, in the clients. So for me, and I do mentor sexuality practitioners as well and professionals. And I'm always working on myself, always. We're just multitudinal and, multidimensional. And so I'm always working on myself. There's always something new. There's always a new angle to look at it. Father issues. Yeah. Worked on that. Oh, this thing's popped up today. There's always something. And so as long as there's a continued inquiry of self going on, where are my biases? Where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? Where's my ego getting in the way? For me, that's what makes a good practitioner of any healing kind, but especially sexuality, because that is in our culture and society where there's so much shame and fear and taboo and stuff.
You talk about reclaiming intuition and about, seeing that part of a man that's underneath the acquisitions of shame and guilt. But I wonder how that sense of reclaiming something that's lost or covered over relates to the notion of moving forward and something new emerging. Is it always a going back to something original, or is it sometimes the emergence of something that hasn't been there before?
I think both. I think it depends on what a person needs and at what phase they are. So like I talk about, if you want to know yourself as confident, for example, you can, I think that I have a podcast on this a little bit. You can try on what that would feel like. Kind of fake it till you make it. You can hold yourself differently. You can walk differently. You can be like, well, if I was confident, how would I walk? That kind of thing. You can try it on. And that's what often reclaiming is. It's finding it's trying it on. But ultimately, what I want is for it to emerge from within. So I could put on the jacket of confidence and go out and kind of feel it a little bit. And that might awaken the true confidence within me. It gives it a blueprint. It says it's okay to come out. It gives, you a little bit of a template. It creates a space in which it can arise. If you're cramped up and going, oh, I'm not good enough and I'm not enough and I've been told I'm shit and all of that, there's no space for that confidence to arise. If you play with it a little bit, you've created a room in the house, as it were.
How much of all of this is about uncramping?
A lot of it. Yeah, it's interesting. I think really if we could just open up and feel free to be who we are at our core, whatever that is, even if we don't know what it is, what a glorious world it would be. If we weren't always trying to fit in or get it right or make our mother proud or whatever it was, yeah, I think that would fix a lot.
As a man, one of the most illuminating things for me was starting to think of ejaculation and orgasm as distinct phenomena. And I wonder if that's something you observe with clients.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sometimes I'll get a client who knows that they're separate things, but want to learn how to separate them physically. But I'd say the majority of my clients don't know it until I introduce it as an option. It's an amazing option for men to explore. It gives you more choice. It gives you more possibilities for pleasure. It gives you more possibilities for expansion. I've already forgotten what the exact question was, but yeah, I think that's a really important piece for men, definitely.
Do you think a lot of people suffer from having too narrow or specific an idea of what is a successful sexual event?
Yes. My experience has been that most people, unless they've done some exploration of it or unless they've done some exploration of it in some way, think that a successful sexual event means there was penetration and at least one person had an orgasm, because that was the end. It's like it has there's a, I've forgotten the word I was going to use, but basically it's a storyline, We do this bit at the beginning so we can get to this bit in the middle, so we can get to this bit at the end. And if those things happened and everyone was still happy at the end, we did it right. And that's great. If that's working for you, great. And there's so much more possible. I was speaking to a chap earlier today, working with him, who was not getting erections as he would like. I don't like the term erectile dysfunction, so I've tried to not use it. And because of that, when he wasn't initiating it with his wife as much because he wasn't sure if it was going to work or not. And his wife was feeling rejected and she wasn't asking him as much. And I said to him, let's talk about what you think sex is and what is your sexual expression and how can you experience that which you get from sex in other ways, and it seems simple when you already know that stuff, but he was like, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. Like, don't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, we have sex, the penetration kind of sex, for lots of reasons, right? Pleasure, relief, connection, intimacy, healing, whatever it is. And it's like, okay, if you're feeling that and you want to do that now, what are other ways you can meet those needs in an intimate way? What kinds of sex might you have without an erection? How might you explore intimacy with, this just, and a lot of people go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And a lot of people are like, I never thought of that before. So, what makes a successful sexual event depends on what you think sex is, what you think success in those terms means. It could mean just that you connected for half an hour, 10 minutes,
A lot of people with whatever we would prefer to refer to sexual erectile dysfunction as, a lot of those people turn to chemicals that increase blood flow through the body. So when you're dealing with people at the level of psychoenergetic and emotional dynamics, how much attention do you put on physical dynamics? How often do you, could be sleep, this could be diet, maybe this person needs more exercise, they're just not getting enough blood flow to their extremities, or how much of it is physical?
It really depends on the individual. So, when I work with someone, I tune into their body and energy system, and it kind of tells me what they need. And a good portion of the time, those things that you're talking about, the lack of sleep or eating this or whatever, are still symptoms of the core issue. So, there's some core issue, and that's causing lack of sleep. It's causing me to eat badly. It's causing me to not get an erection. It's, and so I think it's funny. I did an Instagram live about this earlier today, talking about this very thing, saying that rarely in my experience is erectile issues ever just physical, or just like this chap today was saying to me about his age and weight. I was like, it's not your age and weight. It's never an age issue in terms of because you're that age. It could be because you've collected a whole lot more shame or conditioning in your 50, 60, 70 years than you would have at 20. But it's not the age. Being old isn't going to cause erectile problems. It's just a number, isn't it? It's just that. It might just be the compression of whatever the original issue might be. And so think of this, it's like if something knocks into you and it breaks some capillaries and it causes some damage to some tissue and it breaks a couple of bones, and you never address it and it doesn't heal on its own, then what's going to happen to your hand's going to become a bit dysfunctional. And what happens is things happen, things get said, people internalize it, and it sits and festers if it doesn't get dealt with. Sometimes it turns into a medical issue. Sometimes it turns into not being able to get an erection. Other things come up. You can go back and heal that and create new neurological pathways so that a new system is in place in the body. And then all those other things heal as well. So it's like if you get to the root, in that instance where you're saying, if you get to the root cause of that, not only are you going to create better erections, but they're going to sleep better. They're going to have access to better food choices, say, so for me, I'm not looking just at the erection issues. I'm looking for the root. And once you heal a root of something, lots of other things heal. I mean, truly, I see men change their lives all the time, I'm all hot because I'm excited. Like the men that I've worked with over time who've wanted to really go deep and explore who they are and how they be in the world have utterly changed every facet of their life, from being a totally withdrawn, hidden, quiet little mousy guy behind his desk at his IT job to dating women, powerful women, beautiful, powerful women, giving up his job, finding a job that was much more suitable, moving town, just creating a completely different life than what he had or what he thought was possible. Because if you're carrying, if you're using energetically the energy it takes to hide your shame or difficulty with who you are as a sexual being, that takes a lot of energy. And to heal that stuff, it frees up that energy for you to go, hello, life. Come here, darling.
It must be very gratifying to see those transformations.
It brings me to life. It's like, I feel like I was given this to do. It's my calling. I tried to walk away from it quite a lot. But once I claimed it and said, all right, life, if this is what you want me to do, let's have it. Let's do it properly. It would be true to say that I love all of my clients. I love them so deeply, especially when we're working together. I can't not love them. The work comes through whatever comes through me comes through another channel that is love, unconditional love. And it doesn't go away because we've stopped working together. You know, there's always that connection with them. Yeah, it's amazing.
How do you deal with like transference? Because if you're holding a context of love and the theme is sexuality and people are starting to awaken to multiple dimensions of their sexuality, there must be a tendency for some of them to focus that on you as a person.
Doesn't happen often, but it does occasionally happen. And I'm really clear about it, where if a man I'm working with thinks that I am the key that opened the door to what he's feeling, I will let him know that I am not the key. I may have helped him get to the door, but it's his door and his opening of the door. And here's 1,000 ways to open that door. And that I was just in front of you when it opened for the first time. You don't need me to open that door. It's your door. You can open it. I don't ever want to be in a position of someone needing me to find those places in themselves. I want to go, and here's the key. You know, well done, you opened the door. Here's your key. It's yours. So it doesn't happen much because I think I'm kind of clear about that stuff. I did have one client who came for an introductory session, and it was really powerful. I thought, great, we're going to get stuck in. We're going to do some work. And then he emailed me and said he had chosen not to work with me. And I was like, that's odd. Like, I didn't see that coming. And then a year later, he contacted me and said that he chose not to work with me because he was afraid he would fall in love with me. And I thought, okay, I think you missed out there. It's like, from that place, that's what you thought. But if we'd had a conversation about that, I could have easily course corrected your perception, and it possibly would have been fine. Maybe not. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the universe like saved me there. I don't know. But I know at least, I can think of at least half a dozen clients off the top of my head that I know love me, but appropriately. You know, they know I have a partner. We've been together forever. And it's like a human depth love and appreciation for who each other is, but it's not romantic. It's very different to, like, I had a chap say to me once, "Oh, I wish you were my wife." It's like, you really don't. You want this bit of me that you've met that's opened up that in you. But you don't want to smell my poo at the end of, like, when I've gone to the loo. You don't want to see my socks on the floor or leaving dirty plates, or not that I do any of that, of course. But, you know, the reality of life, the minutia of life, that's actually really the intimacy of life, that's a very different thing. You know, that's not, people don't see that in sessions. So yeah, anyway, I could talk to you forever. So I'm going.
Where do people's sexual proclivities come from? How much of it is sort of innate, maybe even in an energetic body or in our genetics, and how much of it is learned or imprinted on us early in life in terms of what we desire?
I couldn't give you percentages. I think it really depends on everyone's unique journey. I think we come in with some stuff, possibly from another life, or I don't know, you know, but I think we come in with some proclivities. And I think that some are conditioned in through our experiences. I knew a chap who, he had a real thing for women in knee-high boots, particularly white ones, but any kind of boots. And when he tracked it back, I was like, I wonder where that started. He said that when he was coming into puberty, one of his teachers, who always had her back to the class because she was writing on the board, wore knee-high white boots. And so it just got wired in his system. I'm starting to feel aroused because puberty is kicking off. And I'm looking at that all the time, every day. And it just got wired in him, you know. That's all right. You know, he just asked his girlfriends to wear boots sometimes. You know, it depends. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I think gets wired in that we can use for healing. Like, for example, there's a lot of stuff in the kink world about how people can take things that were harmful or traumatized and turn them around and bring erotic energy to it and reclaim it, you know. And so there's a whole realm of that I am probably not eloquent on talking on, but yeah, I think we come in with some. I think some is conditioned. I think it's really interesting to explore which is which, if it's helpful and useful to you. Yeah.
S&M stuff is interesting because it's sort of an open question how much our psyche can benefit from exploring dominance and submission relationships and also sort of resistances and intensities. What's your general impression of the potential usefulness of that stuff?
Yeah, potentially, I think it's an absolute gold field of healing and transformation. I think there's so much goodness there to be explored if you are someone who wants to either heal something, transform something, or know yourself on a deeper level. You know, like you said about power play, I think that we are, I hope, I do have some days off from this thought recently, but I do feel like hopefully as a human cohort, we are moving towards power with instead of power over. We've been in a power over structure for a long time, and that doesn't work, which is why we're seeing that fall apart everywhere. Either it's going to grip on and not let go, and that's bad news. Or my hope is that we're coming into more power with. There's a lot more consciousness around that and exploring that in an erotic nature. And a lot of kink isn't even necessarily sexual specifically, but it's a safe arena to explore that which is doesn't have another place to go. And so you can explore, exploring owning your power or being a powerful person when you haven't felt that before, or letting go of that when that's who you have to be in your life. You know, the trope of the men that are going to see dominatrixes are usually high-powered men in top jobs, is true for a reason, you know, because in their lives, they've been conditioned to hold power and always know what they're doing and run the business and run the family and hold all the power. But that's exhausting, you know? And so being able to let that go for a while is deeply healing, you know, and the vice versa of that is also deeply healing. So I think there's like so much unexplored territory there that is has powerful potential in it. Yeah.
A lot of people I've spoken to in this series have advised slowing down certain aspects of sexuality. And I think that's to get a richer sense of what's going on at subtle thresholds of the process. Because I think, you know, when we think about things like a power play, it relates to issues which can go way too far unless you're attentive to the delicate, the slightly calibrated version of it, right? Nobody really wants to be raped or really wants to be choked or even autoerotic asphyxiation. People die from that, but dying was presumably not their intention.
Right.
So they shot past the threshold that they really wanted into some kind of extreme that sabotaged what they were after. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this goes back to what we were saying before about learning to feel, sense, and know and access your own subtle energies, your own inner knowings. And, you know, when we come into a space, if we're coming into a space to be erotic, whether that's of a power play nature or not, if we're coming in from our head, okay, I need to know what to do here. And is she enjoying this? And am I doing it right? You're not present. You're not there, you know. And same with kink. My God, I saw a guy at some play party years ago. He had a beer in this hand. He had a flogger in this hand. He's flogging someone there and talking over here. And I was like, dude, you know, and he would go to his buddy and say, I'm so kinky. It's like, you weren't there. You like, and so, you know, if in order for something to erotic to feel good, to be deep and meaningful, to have some substance to it, to be transformational, you have to be present in it. And it takes us some time to get present. You know, we have our minds in a million different things these days. Distraction is a great control, isn't it? Keep everyone distracted. They don't pay attention to their own wisdom. Much easier to control. But if you can come back to what's my body feeling and telling me right now, and how can I be present with you right here? It's already erotic because you're in the present moment. And then it's how do we want to play here? And also when you go into some of the stuff, some of the kinky stuff that has potential to bring up people's triggers and trauma and whatnot, you want to be really present with that. You want to see, oh, wait, they're going off somewhere there. Let me check in with them. Do I need to bring them back? What's going, how do I keep us all safe in this experience? And you've got to be really present for that, So for me, that's where that slowing down comes in, slowing down, coming back to yourself, and then being present, and then going off to play.
Yeah, I like the emphasis on presence. There's a kind of slogan in the integral community about clean up, grow up, and show up. And the showing up is the being present part.
I like that.
What, from an energetic point of view, what happens in a good orgasm, and what does it do to consciousness?
Oh, you big questions. Damn. What happens in a good orgasm? And what was the last part?
And what does it do to consciousness?
Well,
or how should consciousness be with it? It's maybe a different way to ask the same question.
Yeah, I think language is tricky around this. So in terms of what is a good orgasm, it wouldn't be my place to tell you what a good orgasm is in a way, because, for example, there are a lot of men, and I'm speaking of men because I know that better, who get off on what's called ruined orgasms. Right. So like a power play thing where they're coming close to orgasm and then it's ruined in some way by the dominatrix. And that's the thing that gets them off. So it's called ruined orgasm, but for them, that's the best kind of orgasm, So if I had to venture carefully into that field, I would say that it's where you let go completely, even if it's for a few seconds. Isn't it the French that call orgasm le petit mort, the little death?
Oui.
And it's like the death of the ego, the death, right? So there you are. That is the consciousness. It is the explosion into consciousness briefly, isn't it? Or longer if you know how to do that. And so in terms of consciousness, I think it is like, in a way, it's what propels you into your knowing of yourself as consciousness.
Nice. What do women most often ask you about male sexuality?
They don't much. Because I don't work with women, and my women friends and colleagues, they ask me. We don't talk about it much. I think because it's my work.
I would think they'd be curious.
I think because it's my work and they know that that's of course confidential.
Sure.
They don't ask. And I'm just thinking, like, there's my mentor who already knows, because she looks at me intuitively the way I look at my clients intuitively. She knows from that perspective. She does sometimes ask me about things going on with her and her partner. Actually, she asks for advice or what's going on, or she'll say something. I'll be like, yeah, let me reframe that for you. Maybe he's thinking this, so that does happen. Other friends, a lot of my friends are queer, so not necessarily with cis men. And other people, yeah, I get, usually they send their men to ask me the questions. That's usually what happens. They're like, go see Rebecca, So yeah, a long time ago, before I was doing this work, I was already doing in the healing realms, but I hadn't focused in on sexuality. I had a good friend ask me if I would teach her how to give a blowjob. And she was like 40 something. I was like, you never given a blowjob yet? She was like, no, my husband won't let me, but I'm kind of having an affair and I would like to do it. I was like, lots to unpick there. But whoa. So there was a whole thing that her husband wouldn't let her give him one. So that was a whole thing. And then there was like, I wouldn't judge her. She was doing what she needed to do. And so we kind of got some bananas, and I taught her what I knew at the time. It was great. She did her thing. but then that's not really where the level place that I work at anymore. So I don't really get asked that, I guess, anymore.
Well, I'm out of questions. Is there anything else you think we should talk about?
I think you went all the good places. Really, you ask great questions, and questions I really obviously found quite meaty and juicy to get into. So yeah, is there anything else that The only thing that I feel left to say is that I really want men to know that they're not wrong, they're not broken, they are not not enough, double in there, but that, you know, that whatever you've been told you are or aren't, there's a core you that is perfect and beautiful, and all of you are source, you are consciousness, and sexuality is a part of that, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience and we straddle both worlds. And so if we weren't meant to have a body that was able to experience pleasure and arousal, we wouldn't have it. That's it. So why not embrace the human experience while we're here and explore it, and the spiritual, like the two together is where like the really good stuff is.